As moderator of First Plymouth Congregational Church, I officially call this meeting to order. I would now invite Reverend Jenny Schultz-Thomas to offer our morning prayer.
Thank you. Let us be in a spirit of prayer. And I know you've been sitting for a long time. If you need to move around or stand up or just shake things out, don't shake the spirit out, shake the spirit in, but get the wiggles out. We are an embodied people. And what we are doing today takes the work and energy and mind and fortitude and significant attention to detail and to the future. So this is an embodied action that we're taking today. So let us be a people calling upon a God who lives and breathes and moves, and let's be embodied with God in this prayer. Holy God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this people, for this earth. Thank you for this moment. Thank you for all the moments that led to this moment and for those that will follow. Thank you for the shepherding of your people and the guidance that you have given us. Thank you for our leadership. Thank you for the minds, for the questions, the hard questions, and naming the hard truths. And thank you for the hope that comes when we do that. God, bring us to center as we bring our bodies, our minds, and our spirits to this task and to those of the church. Call us to be of one mind, one body, and one spirit. Breathe peace upon us. Give us your wisdom and help us to uphold the integrity of all the saints of the past and of the present, and those who will come to bear upon the decisions that we make. Guide us today and each and every day. Amen.
The minutes of our last congregational meeting were held on September 19, 2021, will be presented and approved at our next scheduled congregational meeting, which will be held in June of this year. I will point out that there has been one change in the order on our agenda. The challenge of a balanced budget will be presented before the First Plymouth Fund overview. Please note this agenda change. In regard to today's special meeting of our members, the establishment of a quorum is necessary to proceed. Our church bylaws state that a quorum for any meeting of its members is 75 persons. Before we establish that we have that quorum, if you are participating with us online, please indicate if there is more than one church member currently logged on. You can do this by using the chat feature and reply with the total number of members participating. In this way, we will ensure that all members are counted and that all online votes will be received and tallied. So at this time, I'm going to have the counters. You're already done? Wow, they're fast. And then we've got the online vote count. We're good. Okay, we do have a quorum. Thank you. Today's meeting has been called by Church Council and myself as moderator with the purpose to approve the resolution to dissolve the First Plymouth Foundation. It is important to note that all members of First Plymouth Congregational Church are also members of the First Plymouth Foundation. For voting purposes today, a simple majority will determine the outcome of any motion. Regarding today's agenda, we will have 2 informative reports for the purpose of providing background and history of the matter at hand. At that point, we will then call the meeting of the First Plymouth Foundation to order. We then will hear a report on the background of the proposed resolution to dissolve the First Plymouth Foundation. We will hear the resolution in its entirety read for the record, hear the motion to dissolve the foundation, and finally vote on the resolution to dissolve. The above stated are the sole purpose of our meeting today. The next order of business is to hear our two special reports. I will call Carol Westfall, Church Treasurer, forward.
Thank you, Liz. You've heard from me a number of times over the last few months, both in writing and verbally. So this morning, all I'm going to do is hit the high points, a little bit of color coverage of the reports that you've seen from me over the last few months. Ken and Diane will then tell you more about a couple of ways that we can rise to our budget challenge. So may I have my next slide, please? Our church policy requires that we have a balanced operating budget every year. And the last fiscal year in which our operating revenues exceeded our operating expenses was the 2017-2018 fiscal year. We've balanced our budget to meet our church policy requirement for balancing that budget through extraordinary infusions of revenue, of funds, largely from federal government COVID relief programs. If we look ahead for the next 5 years and assume 4.5% inflation, which I hope, and you probably hope, is as bad as it's going to get, and all other things being equal, our gap, the challenge of our budget over the next 5 years is a $1.77 million gap. As we looked at ways to close that gap or to begin to rise to our budget challenge, it was obvious that First Plymouth has two unrestricted sources of funds from which we could use the earnings to help our operating budget gap, to help close our operating budget gap without dipping into the principal. By allocating 5% of funds, of the unrestricted funds, which have earned 8 to 9% over the last 5 years, by allocating 5% of those unrestricted funds, we could close that budget gap and meet about half of the budget challenge. And the resulting gap would be about $928,000. The unrestricted funds which were in the First Plymouth endowment have already been brought into the First Plymouth Fund umbrella by council action. And the other source of unrestricted funds is the foundation, and that's the topic of today's meeting. So I'd like to ask Ken Hoagland, I didn't see where you were, to talk a little bit more about the First Plymouth Fund itself.
Thank you, Carol. You've now heard a bit more detail about the challenges that we face with our budget over the next several years. And you might ask, what are the reasons we face these? Well, there are two major reasons in looking at it that we have found. One of them is that the membership of this church is decreasing. All you have to do is look at the number of memorial services and funerals we've had in the past 3 months or last 6 months even to be able to understand that. The other reason is because we have an aging building. And if you look at the budget that we passed last September, we allocate approximately 20% of our budget each year toward upkeep and maintenance of this building. And based on a recent study done by our facilities team, that's not enough to keep this building fully maintained. And so those are sort of the two major reasons. And we're not alone in this. They're almost all mainstream Christian churches are facing almost the same problems. We've talked to a number of our UCC colleague churches, and they too are facing a lot of these same problems. Now so we're not alone. However, we are alone in one very significant way, and that's what Carol alluded to. We are the beneficiaries of some reasonably significant donations that were made to this church in the past by First Plymouth members. These began as early as the early 1900s, when there was a thing called a Bailey Fund that was set up to help support people in religious education. This really became a significant part of our community in the early 1980s, which generated the funds that originally set up the foundation. And that continued all the way up until the beginning of this century. We had such significant gifts from people such as the Turpin family, the Knight family. And then in the year 1999, the endowment was set up. And we don't need to go into the details of that, but that was primarily a significant gift from the K. McHugh estate and the Irene Brand. And those are the names that are still on some of these funds. Over the past year, the leaders of the endowment and the foundation have realized that under current circumstances, there was a much greater need for coordination among those two funds. Let me repeat that. Over the past year, the leaders of the endowment and the foundation found that there was a much greater need for coordination in the use of their funds. So this has led them to approach church leaders, your finance committee and your council, to seek a way for this coordination to be made much easier. And the result is the establishment of the First Plymouth Fund. This happened on January 1st. During November and December, the council found the trustees who are who make up that the board of trustees for that fund. And in addition to myself, these include Kim Wooldridge, Eileen Robinson, Kent Lemberg, Annie Nestor, Harry Adair, Grover Rend, and our treasurer, Carol Westfall. Since the beginning of the year that this group has met at least 3 times, we've refined the charter, set goals for the year, and selected a financial advisor. And the final step in this process is the resolution that is the subject of today's meeting, where the funds for the foundation will finally be transferred to that fund. That fund will represent these generous gifts of people in history that now amount to $5.5 million. And I think it's important to note that there was a significantly smaller amount that was originally donated. It's only in the neighborhood of about $3 million that were donated. And so over the period of time that these funds have been held and shepherded and invested, we now have $5.5 million. So with that, as a little background on what the foundation or what the First Plymouth Fund is, we'll start. I'll give this back to Liz.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Carol. At this time, I will call Denise Brown, President of the First Plymouth Foundation, to call a meeting of the foundation to order.
Thank you, Liz. The meeting of the First Plymouth Congregation is officially adjourned, and I call to order the meeting of the members of the First Plymouth Foundation, which we are in now, which also has a quorum, which is the same quorum required by the church. The background provided by Carol and Ken pretty much spells out where we are today. We've had 2 information sessions, a lot of good discussion. In your packet is a background summary from me about what the Foundation Board is recommending to you today. And there is also a brief statement by Steve Haskins, who's been involved longer than anyone else on the Foundation Board. And we thought it was important for him to share his thoughts about this action. Part of your packet includes a resolution. And what I'm going to do is read that resolution so that it's read into the record of this meeting. The Foundation Board feels very strongly that all of the requirements that they are asking the members of the First Plymouth Foundation to approve be codified today, so that in the future, we can look back and make sure that those requirements are being met. After I read the resolution, I'll open it up. We'll have a motion to approve the resolution, a second to that motion, and then we will entertain any discussions that might be left after the many sessions we've already had. Okay, the resolution from the First Plymouth Board of Directors to the First Plymouth members, which is a resolution to dissolve the First Plymouth Foundation. Whereas the Board of Directors of the First Plymouth Foundation have made a recommendation to the members of the foundation to dissolve the foundation, and whereas upon dissolution of the foundation, the board recommends all funds of the foundation be transferred to the First Plymouth Fund created by the church, and whereas the board recommended that the members endorse certain requirements for transfer of the assets to the foundation of the First Plymouth Fund. Resolved that the members approve the dissolution of the foundation with the following contingencies recommended by the board. A, upon dissolution, all funds will be transferred to the First Plymouth Fund. B, the general fund of the foundation be managed as a permanent endowment. C, donor restrictions on other funds will be followed unless a relevant and appropriate process results in a change of the use of the funds. D, all transferred funds will be managed consistent with the fiscal policies of the church. E, an annual written review of funds will be conducted by an independent CPA, the scope to be determined by a committee designated by the church council. F, an open and competitive process will be conducted to engage an investment advisory firm. And G, outstanding obligations of the foundation will be acknowledged by the church and paid from the appropriate fund if the obligations are not discharged by the foundation before the funds are transferred to the church. A list of these obligations includes 2 education grants, 2022 Caring Awards luncheon subsidy, and the completion of the 2020 and 2021 audits, and investment fees that accrue before the transfer of funds. Liz, do I have a motion? Jan? Doug? Okay, any questions? Are you sure? Last chance, it's over. Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. All opposed? The motion passes. The meeting of the members of the First Plymouth Foundation is adjourned.
Well, that was quick. Thank you. Thank you very much, Denise. We didn't even need to do a count. That's great. Let me move on then. Where are we at? We just skipped a whole bunch. I'm going to call Reverend Jenny up to make an acknowledgement of our foundation and endowment boards and their members.
Thank you, Liz. I want to echo what was spoken by at least 1 or 2 who've already presented, and I've said this before. When in service to the church or to the wider community, all of you take pride in making it count and making your actions count and standing for something. I think even more than the blessings and the gratitude that we share. And so making it count, I think, is the mark that we're making today. We're making it count. When these individual leaders, and I'll speak specifically about Denise Brown and Harry Adair, who have been in leadership alongside many of you with our foundation and our endowment, when they began these discussions and acknowledging the crucial decision that the church would need to make, it was with humility and just automatic response to do the right thing that they began these conversations. I've served in 7 churches. I preached my first sermon when I was 12, so let's don't count. But we all want to make our lives count, right? And when we have positions of power where the church or a community asks a lot of us and looks to us to make decisions, that feels really good. And we feel like we're doing a service. Each of these individuals, when pressed to examine the financial feasibility of the future of First Plymouth and the opportunity and the hope in front of our community, they immediately acted as the beneficiaries of this community, not seeing their own role as leading a foundation and supporting the wider community or the assets of the endowment as primary. Automatically, they looked to the greater needs of our present future. And that is, I've seen a lot of ulterior motives in my time, and so have you, when leaders assume roles of power and position. And I personally, as the pastor of this congregation, want to thank both Denise Brown and Harry Adair, and those who are serving alongside in the foundation and the endowment for the opportunity to lead as servant leaders. Instead of deciding, no, I want to hold on a little longer, I want to make decision on my own, or I want to look 5 years ahead and hold my legacy a little bit longer. They instead chose a mutual legacy of faith for this congregation. Thank you, Harry Adair, and thank you, Denise Brown. Right. As you know, and as we've just seen, it takes each one of us. We are Congregationalists, right? But when those at the top, when those we've asked to lead, look first to self and first to what is lacking and not to the abundance of what can be, we can be stifled in mission and giving and gratitude. I want to thank each and every member who has served, not only in the recent years, but the many years on the foundation and the endowment. So when I read your name, if you are present, would you please stand? Foundation Board of Directors, Denise Brown, Nancy Jo Shaw, Steve Haskins, Paul Erickson, Annie Nestor, Liz Massatelli. Please stand so that we can show you our appreciation. Remain standing. You're not that tired. Remain standing. If there are others who have served on the board of directors for the foundation, even when it was called something different, please rise. Right. Thank you. Please be seated. And now the endowment, which serves under the leadership of First Plymouth Council, Harry Adair, George Haskins, Nancy Jo Shaw, Diane Hoagland, Ron Gardner, Rhonda Hertel, Dallas Dew. Thank you for your service. If you have been a part of the endowment and served in that capacity for First Plymouth, please rise so that we can show you our gratitude as well. Elizabeth, Denise, many of you who are too humble. Thank you. I want to read from John O'Donohue, a blessing. It's called a blessing of your work. Imagine this not as your work only today, the work of the past, the present, and the future. Each of you receive this blessing. May the light of your soul guide you. May the light of your soul bless the work you do with the secret love and warmth of your heart. May you see in what you do the beauty of your own soul. May the sacredness of your work bring healing, light, and renewal to those who work with you and to those who see and receive your work. May your work never weary you. May it release within you well springs of refreshment, inspiration, and excitement. May you be present in what you do. May you never become lost in the bland absences. May the day never burden you. May dawn find you awake and alert, approaching your new day with dreams, possibilities, and promises. May evening find you gracious and fulfilled. May you go into the night blessed, sheltered, and protected. May your soul calm, console, and renew you. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Jenny. On behalf of Church Council, the Board of Trustees of the First Plymouth Fund, the members of the foundation and the endowment committees and the finance committee, I want to sincerely thank each of you for participating in today's meeting. This is an example of our church at work, participating actively and responsibly. The leadership of First Plymouth appreciates your continued commitment to our church family. At this time, I adjourn the meeting of the members of the First Plymouth Congregational Church. Thank you.